we are being interacted with by extraterrestrial, or, as we'll discuss, perhaps something else, something we might call ultraterrestrial, or there's a massive psyop going on, and there's something the government really doesn't want us paying attention to, and this is meant to run interference for it. So,
well, we'll get into that. I guess we'll get into that possibility at the end.
If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries. Yeah.
This week on the Super Secret Podcast, Ultraterrestrials. Who are they, and where are they? Welcome back to the show, Secret Keepers. I'm your clock enthusiast, Joel Watts, joined as always by...
Danny, juggling more balls than he can handle?
Yes, 100%. Actually, you're doing a pretty good job handling the balls. I feel like I've been juggling more balls than I can handle in the past few days.
Well, I got a lot of practice.
Yeah, that's true. And today, Danny, you're actually going to be walking me through... you're going to be walking me through the difference between extraterrestrials and ultraterrestrials. Blah? Did I say that right?
Extraterrestrials and ultraterrestrials.
And you're also going to let us know about maybe the almost like the psychographic of ultraterrestrials that we're going to be talking about.
Well, really, we're going to be unpacking a paper by Hal Puthoff.
Okay.
Called Ultraterrestrial Models.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to talk about extraterrestrial and ultraterrestrial matters. I don't know if I would agree 100% with that description of how we're going to approach the conversation, but we're going to figure it out. But the main thing is, if you're interested in extraterrestrial UAP phenomena and you like all kinds of esoteric stuff, you're going to want to listen to this episode of the Super Secret Podcast, because we're going to get into some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
Spooky X-Files type shit.
Well, speaking of spooky X-Files type of stuff, we actually have a question of the week that I'm kind of lined up, to go along with that.
Okay.
So, Danny, as you probably know, Magic the Gathering Duskmourn House of Horror is coming soon. Now, my first question of the week is, how exactly do you divide that up? Because I put Magic the Gathering : Duskmourn - House of Horror.
Duskmourn?
Duskmourn.
Yeah.
Yeah, - House of Horror. That's how I wrote it out. Is
Magic the Gathering Duskmourn House of Horror?
Well, yeah, but the semicolon and the dash, is that correct? Like I haven't seen I haven't really often seen a plane with a subtitle to the plane. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, a lot of them recently have had it, like Innistrad, Midnight Hunt.
Okay.
So
I guess I haven't. Yeah, I've been a little bit out of the loop, so I don't know exactly. I didn't know how exactly to write it out. So what I chose was, the traditional Magic the Gathering semicolon, plain name, and then the subtitle I just put a dash.
I have no opinion on this.
You have no opinion. Okay.
Is that the question of the week?
No, that wasn't the question of the week. That was the sub question of the week. I just thought you might know the actual accurate way of writing it out. But this set is coming out with this scanline VHS aesthetic of these old school horror films. So I thought I'd ask, what is one of your favorite horror films that you love that you think would actually be better on old school VHS watching on a tube TV?
Anything that Cronenberg or Carpenter made, probably. The Thing, Videodrome, those were movies that I felt like both really benefit from it. Their approach to viscera and gore just looks so much better on a shitty television.
Yeah, I think I can agree with you. You basically took the gambit of like the two directors I think did the best job with it. Like, the old school, like those old school TVs and the VHS players, they would crunch the blacks a little bit. So it's like it would even help hide their, because their effects were amazing. But even just having a little bit more hidden in the shadows left more up to the imagination. I think it's like almost anything from the 80s. It's almost like the 80s movies were designed to be watched on VHS. But if I were to just go for one, I don't know. There's something about the Terminator.
Terminator is a good one.
I can't imagine.
Another 80s.
Yeah, exactly. I just can't imagine. I think I've only seen that movie on TV with commercial breaks. I don't even know what that
Ugh.
movie looks like without commercial breaks.
I hate commercial breaks.
Yeah.
That's too early. We just got warned about this.
Yeah.
I was going
Well,
to throw us to a commercial break, except one, that would throw off the pace of the show. And two, Will, the editor, said, no, because apparently last episode we did that 2 minutes in.
well, we can throw to a break because, I think we've answered the question. I mean, there was a time and place for that aesthetic, the tube TV, scan line, 480p SD. It had like a look to it, and there was like a time and place for it. And it's almost like some media actually works better not cleaned up. So
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, DVDs suck. I don't know. Is there anything that looks better on DVD?
then VHS tape.
Just in general. Like, is there anything that's like, oh, you really want to watch this on DVD?
I would love to talk to an enthusiast who would know for sure. I mean, no, I don't know. It's like an in between. It's definitely an in between step. Like there's not enough what is it? Like weirdness or just uniqueness to the DVD. It's too pristine, but it's also too lacking in fidelity. So it's like you either want the Blu-ray or you want the VHS tape at this point.
Really, the only thing that's benefiting from like these super high definition, formats are things like nature documentaries where you have this beautiful 70 millimeter film where you can really appreciate the details. Mm-hmm. It's like a lot of the stuff is like, well, I don't know if I really want you to see all of the, the fish wire and digital effects. There's something beautiful about the imperfection of low res.
And the dreamlike quality of 24 frames per second. Because that was a huge, criticism of specifically the Hobbit series when that came out in high frame rate 48 frames per second, and people said that in 48 frames per second all the props look like props.
Yeah,
it's amazing how that happens. But Ang Lee,
or that it could get greenlit and shot millions and millions of dollars of film, mm-hmm. and then be like, this doesn't look great. We made something that doesn't convincingly sell as Middle Earth here.
Yeah, unfortunately they shot at 48p. They just had to cut the frame rate in half, and then they got the 24p. So it's like that wasn't that was a nice experiment. They had the budget to experiment, but there was other movies. The Ang Lee actually did a few movies in 120 frames per second, and I saw one of them, and it was called Gemini Man, and that actually benefited. I think there's a place for it.
What needs to be true about your movie for it to want to be in 120 frames per second?
From what I saw, it's a next level of hyper realism. So I told everybody this. I thought this movie, this technology, first and foremost, should be used for if you're into this sort of thing. No, I was going to say adaptation of Bible stories, because I think that the idea of or maybe Greek pantheon, one of the two, but it was the idea of these close-ups on faces almost looked like God, like Will Smith's face in close-up at 120 frames per second almost looked like a god talking to you on that big screen. So it felt like it would really benefit and be very useful for those kind of biblical or extra, I wanted to say extraterrestrial, but this hyper realism or this almost fantasy of
larger
the
than
mind.
life kind of thing.
Very, very much larger than life.
Interesting.
Yeah, anyways, but then you wouldn't be able to really get a home presentation because very few TVs, especially things at TV size, would go at that frame rate. You'd have computer monitors that do 120 frames per second, but not and then I have no idea what kind of file size would that be. 24 frame per second high definition 4K file sizes are in the gigabytes. Now imagine multiplying that by an additional 4 for each frame.
So maybe 4x the size.
Yeah, man, that would be. I mean, it's just a storage nightmare, and I don't think it would be streamable. You'd have to have the file locally, I'm pretty sure.
It sounds terrible.
Yeah. Well, I hope we've been talking enough on this subject to warrant a commercial break.
Have we earned a commercial break?
Oh no, we'll be right back.
This week, we want to tell you about a brand new game coming to Kickstarter on September 10th called Pantheon. It's a new strategy game from Archwood Games. In it, you play a demigod competing against your siblings for the control of the creation of a brand new world. It is a very fun game with secret agendas and a lot of back and forth. Check it out on Kickstarter September 10th.
Now, back to the show. Welcome back to the show, Secret Keepers. Now, Danny, you have a subject that you've been pretty excited about. And, we experimented last time with doing a little bit of research. This week, you've done all the research, and I'm just getting to sit back.
Go
and
figure. We are
hear the
experimenting with learning a little bit about what we're talking about in advance of talking about it.
We'll see if this works out. I kind of like shooting from the hip myself, but I'm excited about your subject matter. You are excited about your subject matter. You've been kind of like chomping at the bit to talk about it. So with no further ado, Danny, why don't you get into it?
Yeah, so this is technically the second episode of the series we're calling Excavating the Unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And the purpose of this series is to kind of just delve into some of those things that are at the fringe of our understanding. Maybe it's bullshit, maybe it's not, but it's interesting to think about at the very least, especially for people like Joel and I who enjoy writing fiction, designing games that are based on fictional premises.
Yeah.
Whether or not this is reflectant of reality in any way, it certainly makes for good inspiration down the line for our creative endeavors.
Mm-hmm.
So it's worth digging into.
Yeah, it's worth knowing the facts about the speculations or the hypothesis. Know all the facts about that, so that way you can play those things and add them into your toolkit for when you're building worlds or trying to devise plots.
Yes. So as we talked about at the head of the show, today's episode is going to focus on something that is called a ultraterrestrial or ultraterrestrial models. We'll get into that in more detail, including some definitions in just a moment. But beforehand, we need to talk about the other thing you referenced, which is extraterrestrials.
Mm-hmm.
And
because that's a starting point for most people, I would say, in this conversation. If you were to come up and say, hey, Joel, I want to talk to you about ultraterrestrials, I'd be like, don't you mean extraterrestrials?
Yeah.
Come on, Danny. I'm not that silly. You're not getting that one over on me.
yeah, that's exactly how this whole topic started. I said, I want to talk to you about ultraterrestrials on the podcast. And Joel said, you mean extraterrestrials?
And yeah, and I ridiculed and roasted him for like a solid 5 minutes before he finally convinced me it was something else.
And then for some reason wanted Reese's Pieces. I don't know what that was all about. Yeah. Anyway.
Phone home?
Phone home?
Yeah.
So, for background. Okay.
Yeah.
So, as we jump into this paper, there is going to be a couple of statements at the top that are kind of necessary for us to even have this conversation. So I'm going to give a little background. Will may or may not have a little bit of a montage to play here. If he doesn't, just cut to us looking dumb. And now
the controller told us that these objects had been observed for over 2 weeks, coming down from over 80,000 feet, rapidly descending to 20,000 feet, hanging out for hours, and then going straight back up. For those who don't realize, above 80,000 feet is space. All four of us, because we were in F-18Fs, so we had pilots and Wizzo in the back seat, looked down a saw a white tic-tac object with a longitudinal axis pointing north-south and moving very abruptly over the water.
If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries. Yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
And was this documentary evidence, this video, photos, eyewitness? Like, how would that be determined?
The specific documentation I would have to talk to you in a skiff about.
So, in 2017, the New York Times kind of shocked the world by releasing an article that essentially said that there was a secret Pentagon program called ATIP, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. And this program was all about examining UAPs, which are sometimes referred to as unidentified aerial phenomena or unidentified anomalous phenomena. I think more recently people are leaning towards the latter definition because, as we'll get into, not all these phenomena are strictly aerial.
Yeah. And this is like a kind of replace, like if you're on the cutting edge of ufology, ironically, this has replaced the term UFO for the most part. So ufology is not even like really the right term, except for it's sort of grandfathered in. But yeah, so these are basically what we're calling UFOs at this point.
Exactly. For a lot of reasons, they really wanted to move away from UFO. There's a lot of stigma attached to UFO. A lot of people think about flying saucers, and it's been the subject of a lot of ridicule and satire, mockery.
Many prank calls have been made about them. Many forgeries. People like trying to make a name for themselves by saying they've taken pictures of UFOs or captured them on video just for it to be camera trickery of some sort.
Absolutely. So I think in part the UAP definition is both to expand our idea of what these phenomena may be, and also to divorce itself from all of the baggage that comes with the UFO term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure we'll probably seeing some UFO footage up here. Yeah,
stuff,
but like debunked stuff.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
But in 2017, one of the things that accompanied this New York Times article was this release of declassified footage taken by the U.S. Navy of a few different UAP.
Yeah.
And because of the credibility of the witnesses, Commander David Fravor.
We're talking Air Force pilots, right? We're not...
Air Force pilots, very respected Air Force personnel. The fact that it was coming from the Pentagon, I think it landed with the public with a little bit more, wait a second, what are we being told here? Are they saying that there are aliens? And I don't think that these initial discussions really pointed to a conclusive, hey, there are extraterrestrials, more like there are things going on and we don't know what they are and we don't understand them.
Which, I mean, I want to give the government credit because I think that's as much as a body like them can say. I mean, it's for the, ufologist and, other types of experts to sort of go more into the speculation or investigation. Like just the fact that the government, the United States government came out and said, we have stuff and we are willing to show you, but that's all we're going to say about it. I actually kind of condone, give them props, assuming they don't know more.
So there's a lot of baggage there we can get into. And, part of the way I even got on this subject and came across this paper is Lou Elizondo, who was over ATIP, recently came out with his book called Imminent. And he kind of tells the story of ATIP and his involvement in the program and shared what he can share that's been declassified.
Yes.
So
I just want to take a pause. I want to give, yet again, also giving the government credit, ATIP. What a great acronym. It almost sounds like, the tip of alien investigation. They always, it's like they build the acronym first and then figure out what to fill them with later.
Yeah. There's certainly a lot of that going on.
Okay. So, but this gentleman, you said he's releasing a book soon, or it's already come out?
It's already come out. I've read most of it. I'm waiting. Well, who reads? I listen to.
Yeah.
I have. Shout out to Spotify. I have Spotify Premium, and they give you a certain amount of hours of whatever books you want to listen to on their audiobooks, and it's the stuff you want to listen to. It's what's in the bookstore on the best-selling list, and I've been listening to Imminent by Lou Elizondo, trying to get the inside scoop on ATIP and these UAP phenomena.
You hear that, Spotify? That's your freebie.
That's your freebie.
Yeah, no more. You want to be mentioned on this podcast again? Besides our shout outs to where you can find us, you're gonna have to sponsor us.
Yeah.
But so he came out with a book called Imminent, and this is just what he can say, like based on declassified stuff. He's not even he probably knows more, or he could know more.
There's stuff that he cannot say.
There's stuff he cannot say.
But the stuff that he does say is compelling enough for someone like me. That's like either there's something big happening right now in the world. Like we are being interacted with by extraterrestrial, or as we'll discuss, perhaps something else, something we might call ultraterrestrial, but or there's a massive psyop going on, and there's something the government really doesn't want us paying attention to, and this is meant to run interference for it. So,
well, I mean, we'll get into that. I guess we'll get into that possibility at the end. But where do you want to start with this? Like,
sure, this paper.
Yeah.
So in Lou Elizondo's book, he mentions briefly, and this is how I got turned on to it, a paper by Hal Puthoff. Hal Puthoff is a PhD. He's a physicist and an electrical engineer.
Oh, nice.
He worked for the Pentagon as part of its remote viewing program, Project Stargate.
Don't be surprised if we get into Project Stargate more in the future, but that's not going to be today's subject, but that is its own can of worms that we could get into.
But one of the things that was revealed in the book, Eminent, by Lou Elizondo, was that Hal Puthoff, the author of this paper, actually was the chief scientist for the ATIP program for the Pentagon. Mm-hmm. So this paper, which was published in the Journal of Cosmology in September of 22, has been criticized, and there's a lot you can say about it, but it hits a little differently knowing that this was one of the chief scientists for a Pentagon program studying the phenomena.
And just for the record, you said journal. This is submitted to a scientific journal as in peer reviewed, or is it?
I don't know if it's peer reviewed.
Okay.
From what I've read online, this journal doesn't have the best reputation, so we're not gonna stand here and tell you that this is Nature or something.
Yes,
Nature's a good journal, right? And that's the thing.
I would assume so. I'm not a collegiate type, so I just know about the peer review process in abstract. I don't know the mechanics of it.
But here's the thing I want to say. It's
Yeah.
like, look, just because something isn't in, the cutting edge, recognized, science journal doesn't mean that it's not worth thinking about and considering. All cutting edge science starts on the fringe. It starts in a place where no one else wants to believe it.
Well, that's what I was going to say when you said that, cutting edge journal. I mean, this is more likely a cutting edge journal. You have to go through so many hoops and have so much, reputability on the subject matter that, it's like the theories that become like, that we hold most true probably start out in journals like that, or, that's like where they breed themselves or, get themselves started and start, building that momentum towards actually being peer reviewed and everything like that. So this is, like you said, he was, from what I gathered, he's what did you say, the chairman of ATIP or the chief scientist of ATIP? That alone means that we should listen to what he has to say, whether, he could be pretty far out there on speculation, but, the fact that, he has something to say about the idea of there being the way I'm thinking about it right now is other conscious being, like unknown conscious beings of influence.
Yeah.
Possibly.
And that is a good way of potentially talking about ultraterrestrials.
Well, cool. Well, we got the pedigree.
Yeah.
What's the theory?
So he starts off this paper with two statements that we kind of have to accept in order for this paper to make any sense.
Okay.
One is that there is a phenomena happening in the world that is interacting with the human population on Earth. So we have to accept that is true. Otherwise, you're like, I don't understand what we're even talking about in this paper.
Yeah.
And then two, that it is currently unknown whether this phenomena is exclusively extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional, cryptoterrestrial, demonic/jinn, proto or ancient human, time travelers, etc., or some combination of all of these. However, regardless of what it is, it appears that it is not a phenomena that is constituted purely from normal human activity.
Yes. Yeah. It's like if it were to come out, like you said, it's the PSYOP factor, like advanced technologies that we don't know about, but our government has access to or something like that they're trying to hide from us, then, I mean, we're taking that off the table, I assume.
Right. This basically suggests there is a phenomena. We don't know what it is. It's not a PSYOP.
Mm-hmm. It's at least coming from that perspective.
It's coming from that perspective. We're not saying that this isn't a PSYOP. All we're saying is that for the sake of this discussion, we're going to say, let's look at the other possibilities besides it being a PSYOP.
Okay. So if it's not a psyop, was that the list that we're going to go through right now that you just listed off?
We're not going to go through all of those, but
Okay.
we're going to go through quite a few of them.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm excited because they were really tantalizing. So what's the number one?
There are, so I do want to just kind of, let me grab here and talk about, I guess we can do that stuff after.
Nice. Legitimate paper, like
Yeah, I got a
actually
lot of paper.
actually being read. And it's like, this is our first time with actual notes, I feel like this.
Well,
this
I both
dense.
have my notes and then I have the actual paper in front of me because I wanted to be able to reference it. So, I mean, obviously, the first thing you talk about in this space is extraterrestrials,
Yeah.
right? So, the scenario here is, there are spaceships, there are aliens traveling from other planets in the star system. They're coming, they're visiting Earth. Some of them may or may not have crashed on the planet.
They might be little, they might be green, they might be gray.
All kinds of things we don't know. And these crafts that have crashed have been retrieved. Alien hardware has been disseminated amongst U.S. corporations, defense contractors, and so in the paper he says, if this is the case, some of the things we would expect to see is, different multinational companies having technological breakthroughs that kind of seem like they interlock. That it's like this kind of goes with that, so to speak, right? Some examples of what these breakthroughs might be are things like night vision, fiber optics, integrated circuits, the sort of things that. And again, remember the time period that we're talking about here is Roswell, which is sort of what kicks it off, happens in 1947. 1947.
Oh my God, I keep forgetting. Also interesting. Link that back. That was also the birth year of the Doomsday Clock.
The Doomsday Clock. And so we're talking about something that's almost been with us for 80 years.
Yeah.
And so, the idea is that in Roswell, a flying saucer went down and there were actually biological specimens retrieved as well. And so further to this extraterrestrial hypothesis is beyond just seeing technological breakthroughs. We might, if there were biological specimens, we might expect to see things like specific advancements in bio or genetic research. One example of accelerated research might be like what we saw starting in 1970 with retroviruses. They discovered what is called the reverse transcriptase enzyme. And that's basically, I think, what allows retroviruses to encode RNA into DNA. I might have that wrong. Again, we're not a science podcast.
Nope. We're all about the speculation for the purposes of making better stories.
Right. So anyway,
and games.
There was a lot of accelerated research starting in 1970 around retroviruses. Again, none of this is to say this has anything to do with ETs. This is to say these might be examples of the type of thing we might see if something like this were true. Other things that we might see is we might see material sciences, new alloys coming onto the market with advanced properties, particularly ones that have the backing of government agencies that might have, be in close proximity to, places where, ET materials are said to be stored, like Patterson Air Force Base. An example of a material like this is something called nitinol.
Oh, okay. I was going to say titanium.
Well, it's like a nickel titanium alloy.
Oh, okay.
And I don't really know much about it, but basically it's like something that can be deformed and then regain its shape.
Oh,
yeah. And it's got super elasticity. I don't know a lot about this.
It seems like something you've probably seen a video for in a science class. They probably brought out, made enough of it to be able to demonstrate it, but it's probably maybe unsustainable to make it in mass.
No, it's in wide use.
It is? Never mind.
We use it in everything from eyeglass frames to stuff pertaining to medical devices, stents, things like that.
Oh, well, there we go. Learning something new.
So anyway, I'm not going to go into all of these things, but essentially the idea is these are the sorts of trends we might see in culture if the ET hypothesis were actually what was happening.
At least very specifically at Roswell in 1957, because there is a chance that we could have a mixed bag here.
Well, and that is one of the takeaways we'll get to in
okay.
this, is that, none of the existence of any of these things don't preclude that any of the other things on this list also exist.
Okay, cool. Excellent. All the more the merrier, you ask me.
So I want to get, we talked about extraterrestrials. We want to talk about ultraterrestrials. And you kind of took a crack at an ultraterrestrial definition earlier. Why don't you remind us kind of what you said you thought of ultraterrestrials as being?
Well, I mean, I kind of would put this with ultra and extra, but what I said, an unknown conscious, a being, an unknown being of consciousness that has influence over us.
So kind of on the right track here. So this is kind of what I've put together from reading a few different definitions. Ultraterrestrial refers to entities or intelligences that originate on Earth or exist in realms or dimensions beyond human perception. So the idea being these are other advanced intelligences or entities that are co-located with humans on Earth. Maybe they're physically physically with us on Earth, but are hiding from us, and we have not been able to detect them for whatever reason. Or maybe they are here, but there's a dimensional divide where they can cross over, but we can't perceive them.
Yeah, or they know, at the very least, they would have like some ability to influence our dimension, and we can't even perceive theirs. So like that idea would be like they could be right here, and I could be, like technically they're right here, just in another dimension, like, shifted, and I can't touch them, but I'm kind of like flowing through them, I guess. Very much like ghosts, the way we often perceive ghosts.
Yes, exactly. So we're going to talk about some of these other ultra-terrestrial hypotheses.
Yeah, I'm excited.
And this one is near and dear to my heart, because this one is what I would describe as the X-Seekers of Fortune hypothesis.
Yes.
This is the isolated humans hypothesis. And this is basically the idea that a pre-diluvial high-tech society like Atlantis, like the Arakai, still exist and have sequestered themselves for some reason, but they have technology that is still more advanced than us and have been manipulating human affairs for thousands of years, but for whatever reason have deemed it too dangerous to be out in the open about it. Maybe they are concerned about being overwhelmed by the masses. Maybe they are concerned about being exposed to the diseases that humanity has.
We've gotten nasty since they sequestered themselves away. I mean, granted, I'm sure they could probably cough on us and create another COVID-19.
Yeah, exactly. So there's
goes both ways.
Absolutely. So there's some signatures that Puthoff puts in this paper saying, maybe these are the kinds of things we would see if this were true, things we would look out for. So the observation of advanced technology that's like somewhat in advance of what we have. So in 1897, apparently, there were a bunch of reports of airships in the sky across America. This is a big part of UFO legend. They're supposed to have been cigar-shaped, not unlike, say, the Tic Tac.
I was going to say Zeppelin, but that's even better. Yeah, because like all our current UAPs that we're kind of that we take more seriously are in that Tic Tac cigar shape, right?
Yeah, exactly. Other signatures might be unaccounted for financial assets, missing money, industrial grade resources. Suddenly there's lots of minerals, rare earth minerals, or titanium, or maybe not titanium, but different things going missing or unaccounted for.
Well, let's look at the industrial military complex in the Pentagon. They have plenty of things that go missing. Not to bring down the mood, but we're recording this on 9/11, and one of the big things that my parents and other people would often cite is the day before 9/11, the Pentagon was accused of like mismanaging or misappropriating like billions of dollars that they could not account for. I mean, seems like it's up there with this theory, or it lines up with that.
Yeah. So I mean, there are lots of instances where things go missing, and if something
Yeah.
like this were true, maybe this is one
Well, they could be
potential explanation for where it's going.
You know what? I would prefer to believe that it's going to some lost civilization versus where it's actually going, which is probably hookers and blow.
You know what else they probably have?
Hookers and
All
blow.
of our missing socks. For whatever reason, they like socks.
Yes. They somehow they got financial institutions and dryers.
Yeah, there you go. That's exactly it. The dryers are the ways that
the portals.
Yeah, they come and go as they please.
Oh, I mean, right there. That's inspiration for like a movie. Like,
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. The next the next YA phenomenon, dryer teleporter.
One of the other things about this particular hypothesis is one of the ways it dovetails with the extraterrestrial hypothesis is it actually, in 1979, I believe, Jacques Vallée, who's a French ufologist, wrote a book called Messengers of Deception. And in it, he sort of posits that maybe we have UFOs wrong. Maybe UFOs aren't really extraterrestrials. Maybe they are a hoax being perpetrated by some sort of terrestrial-based conspiracy. So the idea being there is, a group of humans that don't want to interact with the rest of society. They are sort of the secret, people who have the advanced technology. They don't want us to discover them, so they come up with a compelling distraction. So we're looking to the stars instead of, under the sea or in the mountains.
Yeah, into the hollow earth.
There you go.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, it's like advanced, kind of reminds me of the Kubrick to fix the moon landing conspiracy. But it seems like the even bigger, more advanced version of that.
Yeah.
But I guess what you're saying is these people would be a completely separate entity. It's almost like a subsect of humans has separated themselves from the rest of humanity and somehow still needs our resources, but also controls our perception of them. I don't know. There's definitely a lot going on with this one of what they could be.
And there's some good conversation we'll have towards the end of this.
Mm-hmm.
As delving into more of like, why would an ultra-terrestrial population be interested in conducting themselves in this way? So the third hypothesis
Okay. Hit me with it.
is the stranded or colonizing extraterrestrials or gods hypothesis. So this one is distinct from ETs. When we think about the extraterrestrial hypothesis, you really want to think of it as, aliens coming from outer space, coming and going, visiting the planet. Maybe they're checking things out, but they're not here. This is like they've been here for a long time. They're amongst us. They're either stuck here and can't get off of the planet and are doing what they can with what they've got, or they're here using the planet, using the human population for whatever it is that.
To bring it back to a Carpenter film, Think They Live, probably.
They think they live, yeah.
Yeah, it's like they are here, they are amongst us, they are influencing us. They might even be, causing, our own, bad things to happen to us. So, yeah, okay. But you said stranded, though.
It was potentially stranded,
Yeah.
'cause, I mean, they don't necessarily have to be here intentionally colonizing it. They might be stuck here for some reason,
Yeah.
They may be marooned. We may be their island.
Think about how rough that would be. If you
Some of
They
the
have to-
signatures that we would be looking for, though, are sort of in our myths, in our stories, in the Bible, in ancient Hindu texts, stories of ancient technologies that are seemingly advanced. We see a lot of that in ancient texts that are beyond our comprehension. Hard evidence for something like isolated mountain bases or again, just fast-moving flight signatures that we can't explain why they're moving as fast as they are. Anomalous undersea activity, covert elite groups of the occult exercising some sort of influence over society, evidence for buried or high-tech artifacts, or unusual signals or radiation characteristics from different locales on and off planet in the nearby, like on the moon, if we saw, that's a weird radiation signature over there, that might be indicative of something like this.
I was thinking, because that does remind me. It kind of reminds me of 2001: A Space Odyssey. There's actually a lot to say about this. This is like one of my most interesting theories that you've brought up so far, because there's the idea like these aliens, if they got crash landed here and marooned here, and who knows how long their lifespans are, but you would think like, yeah, of course they would interact with us in such a way that would create religion, because they're probably trying to raise us all up to somewhere closer to them, so they have people to hang out with, or at the very least more useful minions to manipulate. And then, yeah, like I said, so it's like you almost have like, it's almost like 2001, but the aliens don't just like zap away; they're here amongst us.
Is this what you would call the Wilson hypothesis? These
Wilson.
aliens are stranded, so we're like their volleyball. They're trying
Yeah.
to make a bro.
That's a great way of putting it. They are trying to imprint on us, like elevate us, so that they can actually have an intellectual conversation with us, and we're on the cusp of it, and then we discovered social media.
Because to them we may be as sophisticated as a volleyball.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe they just need just to look us to be just smart enough to be able to imprint themselves onto us.
Our intelligence, our consciousness is the equivalent of the face, the marker face on Wilson and
Yeah, exactly. That they literally, like, he imprints it by slapping the ball. So yeah, I think we'll call that the Wilson hypothesis. I do like that, and then after they got us up to like babbling, they probably then had fun with the occult stuff. It's like, well, might as well see these things just do freaky sex stuff in robes.
Yeah. Like they had a scientist, and they're like, hey, we've run the numbers, and we're never going to get these things to the point where we can have sex with them.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say
ethically,
we sunset this project and let them do whatever they want to each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it's like one of their like immature, troll types is like, well, I have an idea of what I can get these things to do.
Yeah.
Okay. I really like that one. That one is like the most intriguing. Like if I were so far, if you were just like giving me a list of things I have to write a story around, that's the one I'm writing the story around. But let's see, maybe there's another one that might even be more compelling.
Yeah. So the fourth one here, and this is the last one that he goes into in the paper, is the interdimensional or time travelers hypothesis. And so this one's pretty straightforward. There are entities that, are in a different dimension that have figured out how they can cross over into our dimension, or they're time travelers from the future who are coming back here for some reason. And sort of the signatures he points to that we would expect to see are people mysteriously, arriving and disappearing, people whose clothes and manner doesn't quite fit the times, evidence that there were some sorts of financial transactions or futures related, sort of investments or interactions that imply that someone had future knowledge in order to have done the specific thing, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you saw an investment portfolio that invested specifically in 5 obscure technologies that converged into, $1 trillion day or something like that.
Yeah, that can make sense. I'm thinking right now, I would love to know who bought the most Bitcoin the earliest, like just a ridiculous amount of Bitcoin. You would even need to buy that much technically, so you could stay under the radar. Just like, what is the earliest big investment? Like, who was the first one to be like, I'm not just buying this for the transaction I'm making now, I'm buying this to sit on it.
Right, like, because it wasn't like day one you buy 1 trillion Bitcoin. It's like day one you're like, okay, we have to wait for this to mature enough that it's going to stick around. So this is the date where you can go in and get 5,000 Bitcoin or whatever you would need to have an insane amount of money and it not seem sketchy enough to raise alarm.
Yeah, I know. Well, also before it was under but all the transactions are recorded, so somebody could do that investigation, I'm sure, to an extent. There's a lot of anonymity though there. Anyways.
I don't personally favor the time travel hypothesis. As you know from our extensive conversations about time travel, I have very specific ideas about how time travel works.
Yeah, we'll probably have to have a time travel episode on this. Would it be part of this series, you think?
It could be.
Could be, okay.
Could be.
But yeah, so because I feel like this version of time travel suggests kind of the not branching dimensionality.
It's so hard to say because it's this idea that you wake up living your life and you have the conscious memory of having lived every moment up to this moment, but have you? is there really evidence to suggest that you and I haven't just come into consciousness in this very moment with the memories of everything that preceded it that makes us feel as though we are following a coherent autobiographical line, but in reality, we just sprung into existence preloaded with the memories that would make us feel as though we had lived, you know. So,
every now and then I feel a little funny in my head, and that could be an explanation for it.
I have that feeling too. Sometimes I feel like I just lived through a branching event where I like on some timeline died. And like, you know, like in some weird way,
and like two of your consciousness, like that consciousness and a living consciousness, like converged or something like that.
Something like that. It's almost like there's this timeline, and my consciousness is like the anchor being for it, right? Like we're talking about Deadpool, Wolverine, right? So I'm the anchor being of my own conscious existence, and I'm moving forward. And then some event happens where I die, I split off, but my consciousness continues on in the version that doesn't. Like I always have this like, weird like dark horse, like what if it is just true that everyone around you is part of your simulation and you are the quote unquote anchor being, and every weird thing that could happen that's going to result in you just continuing to go on happens from your perspective. And you think you're living a normal life, but you're really living some sort of anomaly life or like some weird simulated life where you're going to end up being 1,000-year-old vampire or whatever, you know?
That like already like we are too far off the path, because I could talk about that. We could talk about that for a long time. And I think that there's actually a very specific paper that I could bring maybe in the near future that we can go and talk about that and how it maybe relates to simulation theory. But the time traveler theory, because of your own preconceived notions of, or your own like, not preconceived, more like your own educated conclusions about time travel.
I don't know how educated they are, but they are my conclusions about time travel. It's
yes,
like my intuitions. I'll just say my intuitions as to how
so
time
could not coincide with this paper's time traveler theory. But what does he have to say about it? What is his speculation?
You know, it's sort of what we just talked about. You know, you would expect to see, you know, these financial transactions.
That's right.
Foreknowledge, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, we've all seen like. If there are time travelers and this is the truth, like there's probably danger zones. Like anytime after the camera was around, probably a danger zone to go to. But we've all seen pictures of people in crowds that look oddly out of place.
Yes.
Now, granted, you could explain those differences like that. Usually if somebody looks at the picture long enough who has knowledge of the era, they can explain away all the reasons why the person looks odd, but they still could have existed in the time. But we know that sensation of like you're looking at a crowd of people in a picture, and all of a sudden you'd see somebody who looks like they're from the 1990s, not the 1950s.
Exactly right. And so these are sort of the four hypotheses that he puts out in this paper, and once he's lined them out, it sort of goes into why there might be good reason to suspect an ultra-terrestrial hypothesis has some validity over an extraterrestrial hypothesis. So I want to just talk about this because I found this to be pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And for me, this kind of points towards specifically the isolated humans hypothesis the most when I really think about it. Now, there's other reasons. I mean, it doesn't have to be this. You know, there's a lot of other reasons why, you know, the stranded ETs might care about some of this stuff. But let's just talk about some of these factors that make the ultra-terrestrial hypothesis seem interesting to consider.
Yeah. And just to go back, that was the first hypothesis you mentioned, like the Atlanteans or something to that effect. Like
Yes. The quote unquote, like, you know, the originators of the Atlantis myth.
Okay.
For ease of doing business.
Yeah, that sounds great to me.
So the first point he makes is sort of the density of sightings over decades, if not centuries.
Okay.
Which sort of indicates that there is this persistent, you know, there's this persistent engagement happening. Whereas if it were extraterrestrial and you have these sort of what I would call space tourists, you would see them come and go maybe once every few hundred years. You might get, you know, or a few thousand years, you might have a little blip. But the idea that it's something that's here and ever present, really maps onto this idea that there's a high density
Okay.
for a long period of time, as opposed to quote unquote visitors.
Yeah, that's true. Especially, I mean, I think it might even be worth saying, like, the idea of ET extraterrestrials coming to us based on everything we know about science, it would be like it would be either very infrequent because of like the lack of faster than light travel. If they don't have faster than light travel, which there's a good chance, since it could be physically impossible. And you would imagine it'd either be like a one-off like Roswell, or it would have to be like an armada descending upon us. I essentially look at Independence Day, the movie, like the idea of like a one-off scout ship turns into the armada coming to us.
Yeah. And then look, I mean,
Yeah.
This paper certainly doesn't preclude extraterrestrials being involved in any sort of way.
Yeah.
Not saying that it's not the right solution or that it's not part of the solution. But I think what we'll find as we get deeper into this paper, and we are near the end, the main takeaway is that if we're going to get to the bottom of the UAP phenomena, we're going to have to open up our minds to other possibilities beyond ETs and ask ourselves, is there a there?
Yeah, exactly. This is why, sometimes I'm a little like dodgy about speculation, but this is what speculation's for, is to broaden our perspective, find all the possibilities and narrow it into the most likely ones.
Exactly right. We are mapping the possibility space.
Yeah, exactly. So, but as you said, it's like if it was extraterrestrial, extraplanetary beings, we probably wouldn't be seeing them as frequently as the UAPs happen, because it feels as though they are amongst us constantly based on like recent
the density
reports.
of sightings would certainly make us feel that way.
Yeah.
Now, the next point here that's of interest is, one thing that is often asked is, have we been seeing this density of sightings throughout history, or has there been an uptick post World War II, meaning post the atomic age?
Yes.
And a lot of the sightings that we see seem to be particularly concerned with nuclear technologies.
Okay.
And there's some assertion here that there's some concern around environmental degradation. I haven't read so much about that firsthand, but I've read a lot about UAPs interacting with nuclear facilities, weapon systems, missiles, things like that. And the point being made here is, if you shared space with humanity on this planet, you might care whether we started detonating these things.
Yeah.
If you shared space, you might care if we started causing, ecological collapse that created an inhospitable environment that, even with your advanced technology, you're like, we're not at the level of geoengineering where we can mitigate this thing.
Yeah.
Like, we can try to manipulate these monkeys into not causing this problem, but once the cat's out of the bag, the cat's out of the bag.
Yeah, exactly. That makes complete sense. It's like, hey, stop nuclear fallouting my backyard.
The amount of sort of like weirdness around this subject, the fact that it's always kind of on the fringe, the fact that it's, there's this whole, ET hypothesis might in fact be evidence of a disinformation campaign to sort of misdirect, right, the attention away from what might actually be here all the time on the planet. Another piece of evidence is a lot of the biological sightings often are humanoid, and when you think about the wide range of extraterrestrials, the different permutations of life, the idea that something came here from out there, and the thing that actually made it here, because that's got to be a finite set to begin with. The amount of species in the galaxy capable of coming here, traversing the stars and coming here, and they also just happen to be humanoid. Like, popular science would make you think everything out there is humanoid, and popular science fiction, right? But in reality, we think about Ender's Game, right? Like as children of the mind, like odds are other intelligent life out there may not even be recognizable to us as intelligent life.
I mean, that's one reason I love the movie Arrival.
Exactly.
Is because it's practical. Like, they're as far, the alien beings in that movie are almost as far away from being human as they can, while still being perceived of as living beings.
Precisely. And so sort of the conversation here is like, okay, like, if these things are humanoid-like, if they either look somewhat like modern-day humans or a variation of them, or maybe they're little grays that are still kind of anatomically similar.
Or very tall grays. I've heard
Yeah.
both. I've heard both. I've heard both small and tall.
Small, tall, well-endowed, all of the above. Ken parts. All these
Unfortunate.
sort of point to a possible variant of the human genome.
Okay.
Meaning, maybe we're all working with similar genetics here.
That makes sense. Like, the idea of like, I mean, like, yeah, if a monkey, if they say like what the difference between monkey's DNA and our DNA is, what, 2%, maybe even less.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and so if that's the case, then just imagine how much we share in common with a small gray. I mean, they look like us. They less hair than a monkey.
Yeah.
But some very similar shapes. Almost can't be coincidence unless you believe that evolution is trying to come to a specific point. Like there's actually a goal to it, and that a platonic ideal, and like an alien planet that had life on it would also be heading towards the same result. It's hard to believe that any amount of finger, like this kind of being that we are with arms, legs, thumbs, fingers, appendages, eyes. It's hard to believe that there'd be another evolved to survive their ecosystem being out there that would look so much like us.
Exactly right. I mean, evolution is so much about being culled by your environment. And so unless you have a very, very similar environment, you're unlikely to evolve in a similar way. And even so, I mean, how many different species are there on the planet in a similar environment that are radically different? Birds and insects and fungi, like the octopi, cephalopods, whatever. There's all these different species on this planet that share space with creatures that are very dissimilar to them. We share DNA, but, we're very divergent, and that's with sharing DNA. Now you go to a different planet with different chemical makeup. I mean, there's all kinds of different ways this can work out.
Yeah. So yeah, that makes, so what you're essentially saying is, what are the odds that the things that we see are as humanoid as us? If that is true, if they are really beings and they are so close to us, then it's almost as likely that they are a different branch of humanity's own evolution, or an offshoot of humanity's evolution that is here amongst us, versus being another human-like being that has come from thousands, if not millions, of light years away.
Yeah, exactly right. Now, here's another one that people are going to, how many, okay, I'll put it to you this way.
Yeah.
We're talking about an abduction story.
Okay.
All right. What are some of the abduction tropes that you first come to mind?
For big one is beam, like, big saucer in the sky shines a light down on you and you get sucked up into a spaceship. And then, some anal probing happens.
Some anal probing, some sexy stuff. Depending on who you are.
Depending on, terrifying stuff if you're like most people, but sexy stuff for some.
There's a lot of emphasis in abduction stories and claims of being abducted. There's definitely an emphasis on the harvesting of sperm and ova.
I was actually thinking, that would be the next, not just the anal probing, but I forget their names, but they were like two of the first people who claimed to have been abducted by a UFO that were went mainstream about it. And the guy mentioned it was a husband and wife, and the husband mentions that they made him ejaculate forcefully.
Yeah.
But it was both pleasuring and terrifying in his recollection, because they did I think hypnosis therapy, so he just was walking through it, and then it just he was reliving it in an office, and it was at least the way that it was depicted, the way I learned of the story. So yeah, that's that would be very terrifying and very embarrassing, I guess, to just
I'd love to make a short film, and I know the role I want you to play.
Well, I think that would be a sketch. I don't know if it'd be a full-blown short film.
It's a drama.
It's a drama.
Erotic hypnosis drama.
Yeah. Anyway, so you were saying about the tropes of alien abduction.
Right. So thinking back to this human population, this Atlantis population that's been secluded. Odds are, if they're a small population, they've got some issues with their genetics. They have a small gene pool.
Oh, good point.
They may need to be infusing fresh DNA, and especially if they're doing any amount of engineering they may just be harvesting what's out there in order to kind of continuously maintain whatever it is that they're drawing from for their own genetics, or if they're working on hybridization or whatever. But certainly an isolated group is going to need some sort of outside genetic material.
Yet again, to relate this to pop culture, and it's not this Ultraterrestrials, but in a small way, the movie. Did you see Midsummer?
No.
No, well, Midsummer is about a very secluded band of humans, if you will, like, a small group within, even for, in Europe, a small subsect of, I think it's Norwegians, I could be wrong, that are like even more separated from society, in their own culture. And one of the things that they're doing in the movie is bringing in outsiders to become new members of their population, but very select few, but also men to come in and impregnate their women, so that the way they have outside genetics, outside.
There's a lot of murder in this movie, though.
There's also murder. They also murder. It's a horror film. They got to murder.
Do they murder the people they're bringing in?
Yeah.
So how does that work? They make them come and then they kill them?
Yeah.
They're like, we just want your...
Yeah.
So who gets to stay?
I guess the ones they really, really like. Maybe, like, I would say the men get to come in and just make their deposits. I think if a woman were to be, like, if they wanted maybe new women, they would probably invite them in, since the baby gestation process. I would say see the movie. You'll see. You can deduce why they choose the person they choose to become part of their society, throughout the movie. But it kind of reminds me of that. It's like they know that their culture is so insulated that they will, if they continue just to be insulated, they will breed themselves into having a weak gene pool, not being able to sustain their own culture. So they have to bring in outsiders, like the aliens.
That makes perfect sense.
Or like the ultraterrestrials.
Maybe we can show some. I'm sure we are showing some
I'm
creepy
sure
stuff from Midsummer.
Yeah,
right
like
now.
just the trailer playing over and over again, possibly. Oh yeah, that was a good part.
One of the last points here. There may be a couple more, but one is we're talking about technologies that are observable and they're advanced, right? But they're not incomprehensibly advanced. Meaning, we've talked about it on here before. It's very common, the Isaac Asimov quote. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Yes.
We're not necessarily talking about technologies that appear to be magical. We can start to kind of comprehend how we might get from where we are to where they are. Meaning, if something really came from across the stars, would we even be able to comprehend what we were seeing? You know what I mean? Like, the fact that we can sort of comprehend these technologies might imply that they're not so far advanced than they're not, maybe they're only 100 or 150 years in advance of us, as opposed to thousands of years.
I wouldn't even think, maybe I'm being, obviously it depends on what happens, but I feel like we've hit this state of engineering and technology understanding that I feel like even technology 500 years away from us, if it was brought back today, we could at least begin to conceive of how it works. Versus, like you said, like anything that would let you travel light years in moments would probably be well outside of our grasp.
Yeah, 100%. And the last thing here is just a lot of the sort of claimed abductions have a lot of recurring themes of being taken to sort of cave-like places or underwater type places, which might imply that they are at terrestrially located bases of operation.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting because, one thing that I don't think we talk about a lot and is not often as depicted in media, probably because of the mystery element, but you get the depiction of being taken in to the ship or, being abducted. But what happens inside, I feel like only, Fire in the Sky, I think is a movie that depicts actually being inside the alien ship, according to one survivor's, recollection. But yeah, you don't often see the inside of the ship and that sort of thing. So I would have to do more research, but I hadn't known that it was often said to be cave-like.
Yeah, I mean, at least there are enough accounts for that to be of interest. So I mean, that kind of wraps up sort of the things that puts in this paper as being evidentiary of like reasons to take a closer look at the ultra-terrestrial hypotheses over the extraterrestrial hypotheses, why it might be even more probable that it is something ultra-terrestrial in origin. And then sort of the ending here, to kind of, bring it to sort of a conclusion, he sort of, kind of posits some reasons why there would be a motive for something like this as an ultra-terrestrial, and I think, it's useful to think of the fact that we've got kings and keeps surrounded by their serfs, right? It's a pretty common trope that the most wealthy, the ones that are really and have the most power still want to separate themselves from the masses, because if the masses get incited, they certainly can, even though there's so much power here and advancement, enough other people may be able to overthrow them, right? Mm-hmm. And so, there could be a fear of exploitation or annihilation. They may have vulnerabilities that that we don't have. Maybe that this technology is sort of like a safe, something that gives them a layer of safety, but if push came to shove and we got in a direct conflict with them, they know that we could hurt them.
Yeah, they made us too smart, too strong. We know how to hit with stick.
Maybe they're afraid of assimilation, losing their culture. Maybe there's a certain purity to the way that they have their religions, their customs. Maybe they don't want the genetic mingling. That maybe there's a fear of human diseases or any number of these things. So, this is sort of the purpose of this paper, is just to, again, outlay that there may be other solutions to this UAP phenomena that are not extraterrestrial, that in order for us to really get to the bottom of it, we have to map the possibility space, and we need to be less passive in our data collection, meaning, everything we do now is like collecting reports. Oh, this person claimed this happened. This person saw this thing. And, and again, like if some guy wrote this, you would be like, okay, well, but do you really know what we're doing?
Yeah.
But if this is, the chief scientist of ATIP, and who knows if ATIP is really the preeminent, maybe there's like a full-blown Men in Black, right?
Oh yeah, they always have that aspect, like whether this theory would almost have me believe that the Men in Black aren't humans working with the aliens. It would have me believe that they are the aliens or the ultra-terrestrials posing as humans.
Yeah,
Which I think has been like, that's my least favorite version of the Men in Black, not because it's not interesting, but because it scares me to death. Like I like
it's
my
almost like the Agent Smith. Like they look like us, but they are not us.
Exactly, but even more freaky. That's like, it's very compelling.
So, in the end, he sort of pushes us to move past what he calls content analysis. The idea being, we're looking at what we can find and making sense of it, rather than trying to find sort of the traffic, the overall patterns, pushing forward with more detection rather than just relying on what falls into our lap. And, pursue more of a gumshoe type approach, or pursue more of a forensics approach to the problem, rather than just picking up the pieces.
I mean, this almost reminds me, like, I think I mentioned this when you first pitched me this topic, but this almost reminds me more of like an FBI, like crime analysis, like the what is it that I'm looking for? The psychological profile almost has that effect.
Yeah, like Mindhunters almost.
Yes, very much. Like if this is what they're doing and this is how they're appearing, then here are the ways that could make sense, and so let's build it from the base of what we know and build the speculation upward, and then build a whole bunch of them, like if these are the bases, this is all the different ways that it could rise, be shaped. It's like, so it definitely strikes me as somebody who's done their homework, somebody who actually has an inside track, and it's far more interesting. And like, I think the fact that he threw in something like time travel, I have my own opinions on time travel. The fact that he threw something in like time travel just shows that they're like really did their due diligence. You said this was the four most popular, the four most interesting you want to talk about, but it wasn't all of them, right?
So these are the four that he covered. I was really hoping that there would be more in here about demonic or jinn.
Oh yeah.
Or crypto-terrestrial. I think
Cryptoterrestrial. Can you define that?
I think that's kind of like this idea that maybe there are other species on the planet. Like the way I interpret it at least is like, what if there really are elves and gnomes and dwarves and those sorts of things?
Okay.
Or Bigfoot or like, different species that are non-human that exist that have shared the space with us for a long time, but we don't.
Yeah.
But, I think those maybe were the ones that he felt were like the least likely. Those were more like, hey, if we're mapping out the possibility space, we got to put it on the board.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go deep on these because I don't really have a lot to say about them.
Yeah. I mean, what would you have to say about them? Because like at that point you're needing to contact the Catholic Church or, exorcisms for the demonic. I mean, that's definitely like you hand this paper off to like, some priest and like have him fill in the demonic side and then hand it off to some fairy expert in the like what is that? Fairies are mostly in Ireland and and then have those experts like fill in those aspects. I'm sure these are the ones that as a scientist, a man of science, he could speak to.
So the paper is Ultraterrestrials. It's the Journal of Cosmology. Dr. Hal Puthoff is the author. You can simply Google ultraterrestrial models and download the PDF. I'm sure we'll link it in the show notes if you're interested. Highly recommend it. And I also recommend checking out Lou Elizondo's new book, Imminent. There's a subtitle. I don't know it, and I didn't put it in my notes, but we'll put it in the show notes.
It should be up here with the cover.
That's a picture of the cover.
Yes.
And this is a picture of Hal Puthoff, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. Will is kind of unpredictable. So
he's a lone wolf amongst the pack.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Well, that was immensely interesting, Danny, and I can't wait to get to our next segment now. After we get back from our break, I am going to attempt to brainstorm a game based off everything I just heard, and we'll see if we can make an interesting one together. All right, but we'll be right back with the Super Secret Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning into the show today. And as always, we are brought to you by X Seekers of Fortune, the game that we both created. The game is live on Pledge Manager. So that means that you can buy your copy of X Seekers of Fortune through Pledge Manager. The way you would get there is you can go to Kickstarter.com, look up X Seekers of Fortune, and there will be a late pledge button. Click on that and it'll take you to the Pledge Manager where we still have plenty of our bundles available for you. Not only that, but you can also get any and all of the add-ons that we had initially offered during the Kickstarter. So go to Pledge Manager or to Kickstarter, look up X Seekers of Fortune and get your copy today while you can still get a discount on it and you can still guarantee your first edition copy of the game. And what makes the first edition copy special, not only does every card in the Action X deck come with a special first edition logo stamp, but also you are going to receive a first edition booster pack. This pack will contain at least 5 cards that can go into the Action X deck right away to augment your gameplay. These cards may be available in the future, but probably never with these first edition artworks on them again. So go to Kickstarter and late pledge and get your first edition copy of the game. Now, back to the show. All right, folks, welcome back to the Super Secret Podcast. So Danny just told me all about Ultraterrestrials, the paper written about the different hypothesis of ultraterrestrials.
Yep.
And I did a little bit of my own, knowing that ultraterrestrials was the keyword to look for. I didn't look into the same paper that Danny did, but I did some of my own research in advance of this. So there was a few things that you brought up that struck me as like having that I had come across, like the idea of the advanced ancient humans was an like it was presented in what I found as an alternative branch of ultraterrestrials versus this person kind of folded them under ultraterrestrials. Also, there was a mention of classics, Hollow Earth and Atlantis in the notes that I saw, but I mostly wanted to look at games because what we're doing now is I'm going to try to attempt to pitch a game, whether it be board game, tabletop game, or video game, to Danny based on the topic. And I just wanted to know what is already out there. And what I mostly found with ultraterrestrials is there's a lot of mentions of them in when it comes to tabletop games, you have Conspiracy X, which is also called X-Files, the RPG, like kind of colloquially, and which reminds me of our early days before X Seekers of Fortune was X Seekers of Fortune. It was Adventure X, and we were kind of trying to build something around that. So knowing that Conspiracy X was out there makes me happy that we moved away from that concept. But there's also Rifts. They Came from Beyond the Sea, and Werewolf the Apocalypse. What these 4 games have in common, and what we're going to see here, is they're all TTRPG systems where this is a story element, not so much a mechanical element, or at least like I'd have to dig into the book. But I wanted to add to that list, as Danny mentioned earlier, X Seekers of Fortune is also now in the pantheon of ultra-terrestrial story.
It really is.
Yeah. So we got to join those. Now, when it came to video games, yet again, and here's the thing that I want to separate my game from, is ultra-terrestrials seem to be really fun for people to throw in as background elements, as like explanations to the story, to the lore, but it's not mechanical, it feels like. So some games that are very popular that you've heard of that involve ultra-terrestrials, and spoiler alert, I'm sorry, but these games involve ultra-terrestrials. Assassin's Creed involves ultra-terrestrials. So does Sonic the Hedgehog. And I know of all the franchises, and then also The Legend of Zelda, specifically Twilight Princess. Now there was one game where it seemed like it was more like those. It seemed like once you got to the end, you know how it goes, especially in animes and things like that. You get to the end, and the big explanation involves ultra-terrestrials, but it's more of like a way of describing a power beyond an other who is more powerful than you can conceive.
Yeah.
Versus the other game, and I need to learn more about this. It seemed like a series, Caney or Stasis, and they have most recently come out with Stasis Bone Totem. I don't know too much about these games. I just discovered their existence today, but they're like point and click adventure games. And I think the core is that you're discovering a ultra-terrestrial species. So I think it's a little more integrated into the gameplay and the storytelling. It's not just the big surprise at the end. It's what you're working towards the entire time. But as I said, what I found a little disappointing is like the ultra-terrestrial element was not gameplay. It was just flavor. So I don't know if like this is my first instinct, and maybe we could talk through a better game, but my first instinct was, because I knew you were going to be presenting like these alternate versions, which kind of ultra-terrestrials are there, and you brought up something I think was very important that I'm glad it came up a lot, was evidence. So I was imagining a Clue-like game.
This is exactly where my brain was going.
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
glad with great minds think alike.
Yeah.
But just from this perspective of how the paper's written, it's like how I would imagine, like you and other scientists or other world leaders. See, I always go big. I like getting like that, bird eye view. So I'm always thinking like world leader scale, if not higher, are trying to deduce. Maybe like there's a deck that's playing itself that is like the evidence or the events coming out, and you also have your own top secret information, much like in Clue, like certain things can't be the truth. Maybe this is the reverse, where you have evidence that show that would point one way or the other, and you need enough stuff to come out for you to nail. Is it ultra-terrestrials that are time travelers? Is it ultra-terrestrials that are what do we say? The advanced ancient humans. I think the Atlanteans, I think we decided to call them. Which one is it? But I was imagining, because you got to put a clock in. So my imagination was every time you make a guess and you're wrong, something bad happens, like a new emergency. Because
That's cool.
Yeah, but I feel like that could be a base that we could go on. Is there anything about that inspires you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely like the idea that maybe it's a cooperative game. Maybe you're working in parallel, but you each have your own areas of research. So it's like, and obviously you would have information that pertains to the other. The thing is like a game like this, for it to be really fun, like this kind of points to something where it's like, we've talked about artificial intelligence a lot on the show.
Yes.
Specifically as it pertains to AI art generally, or image generation, AI generated images. But I do think that there is something about AI that has a place in games when done correctly, which is using artificial intelligence within a game to be an infinite scenario generator, where you set up the mechanics, you build the mechanics of the game, you sort of create, some overarching parameters around the content. But the appeal of the game is that there is an AI engine within the game that is creating a novel permutation every time you're going and able to do things like in a game of Clue, there's a finite set of combinations, right? And you can't feed novel information to one player and then another and it all be interconnected in some way. And no one's keeping track of the conspiracy, right? But in the future, when we have AI engines that are capable of taking multiplayer cooperative games, feeding people information that's tangentially related, doing it on the spot, almost being that DM, I think there's going to be a future where, people are always going to want to play role-playing games where you have a human DM.
Yeah.
But the idea that there's sort of a AI game master engine that allows for discrete types of game experiences that have constantly new content because it's just being ridden by the game itself over and over and over again. That's a future that I'm interested in seeing what that looks like. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it makes sense. That would be. So it's essentially what you're saying there is, and that's a good point that there is a place for AI because there's the reason you probably wouldn't want AI as your DM for a story driven game is because you want that heart and soul of the human experience. But it's a story driven game. This is more this is a complex matrix that has a solution, but we want to make the matrix so complicated and so nuanced and ever changing that only a computer could keep up with it, or no human would want the job of keeping up with it. So we're going to delegate it basically to the AI, one and the same, if you will. So few humans would want to do all this grunt work to get there. But that creates an interesting, because it's how do you advance Clue? I think that's maybe where we're at. It's how do you take something where it's there are correct answers and they're deductible, which is something that also I find it interesting. Clue has probably fallen so out of favor with the rise of Werewolf and Amongst Us, and those kind of games. Blood on the Clock Tower is the first one I've ever played, and it was fantastic. But those kind of games where you are trying to deduce, and they just changed up the deduction style and made it much more human fallibility oriented. So I guess you have to say why aren't the nations working completely together with all the information out? And it's probably because you want to be the nation to find the aliens first, or find the ultraterrestrials first. Whatever, that's the pot of gold, potentially. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's why you don't share information readily unless you actually absolutely have to.
Yeah. I mean, these are the tricky things about balancing games.
Yeah.
And that's part of the difficulty of coming up with a game on the spot. And I think oftentimes, the most we can hope for in the podcast is maybe a genre and some core mechanics to go along with the theme, because it would take us a lot of tinkering to be okay, well, how do you deal with the fact that, this incentive is against this incentive, unless you take the real time to delve into.
That's true. I think, but also identifying the game that we're iterating on, and then talking through how can we make it better.
Yeah,
is also the thing, because what is it about Clue? I mean, I haven't read the instruction manual in a long time. What is it about Clue where everybody doesn't just look at each other and show all their cards? Is there a reward you're trying to get, narratively?
It's not cooperative.
Yeah, exactly. It's not cooperative. So what makes Clue not cooperative? It just the fun of the game?
Well, I mean, I think the idea is that the game probably, as it's designed, wouldn't work if it were cooperative, because there'd be too much information sharing.
So,
and I think, for a game to be cooperative, you really have to have a complex adversary that, requires, whether it's and it can be randomization, right? I don't know if you've played Hanabi yet. Hanabi is one of those.
Can't say I have.
So in Hanabi, you're playing a group of people responsible for putting on a fireworks show.
Oh yes, I keep wanting to play this game. Remind me, is it designed by Richard Garfield?
It's not, but Richard Garfield has kind of
Says it's like the best cooperative game that has ever existed
of the century or whatever.
of the century. Hopefully, it was made in the 90s.
I don't remember when it was made, but one of the things about Hanabi is it does a really good job of getting over the quarterbacking problem, which is sort of the big thing people point to as being the bane of the cooperative game genre. There's that one person who says no, this is what we're doing, and it's just kind of watching one person do play solitaire while puppet mastering the other players.
Yeah, can be really tough, and we're building two different versions of Secrets of Fortune multiplayer. One being competitive, or 4v4, if you will, and the other one being a cooperative game. And I think that's the hang up we always come with a 4-player game is how do we enforce non-quarterbacking? How do we make it to where each player has to make their own decisions without too much input, or without letting another player tell them what to do, dictate what to do.
And one of the approaches there has just been making sure that you can't project game states far enough into the future where I can say, I'll do this on my turn, then you do this on your turn, then you do this on this turn, because there are going to be autonomous game actions that happen in between turns that are going to change the board state enough where you can't rely on that strategy.
100%. And that's one solution. It still doesn't stop somebody from just basically taking over everybody's turn if they're of strong enough force, but it would keep people from, feeling like they can see so far into the future. That's like, why don't you do that? Because then I can do this. Because as long as you put something in between them doing that and you doing this, that could stop you from doing that. Sorry, the terms I'm using, I probably could have come up with better terms, but yeah, basically putting random number generators in between each player's turn, so that way the math that you're assuming during player 1's turn is definitely not going to be the same at player 4's turn.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot more we could talk about here, but I think we probably were spent a lot of time on the main topic. Maybe.
Yeah, we'll find the right balance. This is where we're wanting to move the show, or at least I think both of us, this is both of us getting where we want to move the show to, being more topic oriented and research oriented, but also having this game design, game inspiration, game pitch section. So if you like how the show is going, we did this a little bit in Doomsday, and now we're trying to get to be focused in on one topic this time. Please let us know in the comments below. We would love for this to be the show moving forward, but if it's not resonating,
let us know.
Yeah, exactly.
And where should you let us know, Joel?
Well, I would say that the places that you can most likely let us know, should this be the portion? Well,
no, I'm specifically thinking about the Patreon.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Yes. One of the best ways to communicate with us for the Super Secret Podcast is to get onto the Megamoth Studios Patreon. You can go to patreon.com and look up Megamoth Studios, and we have our Patreon open for free right now. You can just sign up. There's no content, what is it called, paywalled at the moment. So that way, for a limited time, you can see everything that we have to offer there. In fact, we already have something to offer. We have a lost episode of the show. I forgot to press record on the recorder at the beginning of
the audio recorder.
Yes, the audio recorder. So we have an episode where you can only hear, we were only recorded by the camera audio, which was not the best, but it was, if you love this show and want to hear our thoughts on is our binge releases killing television shows, as a concept, you can go to our Patreon and hear my and Danny's thoughts on that topic. If you're going to have to kind of push the headphone into your ear a little probably, but you'll hear us. And we want to do more there, and that's going to be the best way for you to interact with us, give us direct feedback. Now, we might as well, if we're here, another great way of giving us direct feedback is liking us on YouTube and subscribing to our show. That shows that you are very interested in what we have to say. And you can also comment there. We will see it. We will interact with it. We'll probably like it. You leave us a comment, we leave you a like on each of our individual accounts. I'll call it out. He'll like your comment too. So that's another place. But in case you're not you're coming across us on YouTube today, but you don't want this kind of content to always be fed to you through YouTube, you think you could just do the audio version without the screen, I have no idea why you don't want the screen. The screen's great.
I mean, you're missing a lot of cool visual jokes.
Yeah, and Will's doing a great job.
He's killing it.
Killing it. He's just going to get better.
Only better.
Only better. But if this is too much, your eyes, they could use a break. You can find us also on all the major podcast applications. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, they're probably the biggest ones. You can find us there. And you know what? If you want to give us feedback and you don't want to leave a comment on YouTube, you can rate us. If you rate us 5 stars, it doesn't matter what you say. We'll read it and take it seriously.
Maybe we'll even read it on the podcast.
Maybe we'll even read it during this segment. We could end up reading it on the podcast. But if you are a super fan of the Super Secret Podcast, I got a mission for you. Get a hold of your friend's phone. Under whatever pretense. You'll find the restaurant. You'll place the order.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. Just offer to do them a favor. While you're in there, why don't you do us a favor? Open up YouTube, subscribe to our show on their accounts.
Yeah, that's the best favor you can do for us currently, because we don't have paid tiers yet.
Yeah.
In the future, that'll be the best favor.
All right. For sure. That will be the ultimate. This is the ultimate thing you can do for us. In the future, signing up your friends onto our paid tiers with their credit card information. That'll be the ultimate.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, Danny, why don't we go ahead and throw it to one more break before we get into final bits of the show?
Sounds good.
Ah, yes. I see it within you. It starts with a subtle urge. You tried to ignore it, but the call, it intensifies. Do not look away, kid. This is your moment. It is time to set your sights on new adventures in X, Seekers of Fortune. A quintessential 2-player strategy card game filled to the brim with mystical challenges and unpredictable twists. As fortune seekers, race to claim 5 adventures by assembling the necessary leads to fulfill your quests. But who said it would be that simple? Throughout your quest, you and your rival will unearth ancient sites, perform staggering feats, and discover powerful relics for use in noble or ruthless ways. As you gather more experience, you will discover crafty combinations that will save your hide or sabotage the competition, leaving you with the prize. Remember, the line between a legendary explorer and a mere footnote in history is drawn by knowing when to press forwards or when it is time for cunning manipulations. It is time to answer the call. X marks the spot. Set forth and seek your fortune.
Welcome back to the show, the Super Secret Podcast. Damn, you should have been wearing those the entire time, Danny. You look like a true ufologist with those on.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes. All right, folks. So we're coming up to the end of the show, but we got 2 segments left for you. So why don't we go ahead and get into the 8 to rate lightning round?
Ooh, I'm ready.
Yeah. So Danny did the prep when it came to the research this week. So I did the minuscule amount of prep that I could do, the least amount of prep I could do in getting the 8 to rate and the other segment together. So Danny, let's start with the 8 to rate. Now this is our lightning round. I name something, a concept, a title, whatever it is, and you say if it's either, I guess, overrated or underrated. Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, I know. I don't think thumbs
It's
work.
kind of playing like a game with like an inverse.
Yeah,
like, joystick or
exactly.
whatever.
Yeah. I guess overrated.
Which I find to be overrated.
Over. All right. Let's see how long it takes you to get the theme. And I understand if you don't have an opinion on all these, but let's go. First of all, The X-Files.
Underrated.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite shows of all time. At this point, maybe when it was on at its peak, it was possibly overrated. But now I think there's a lot of people who don't know it, don't appreciate it. It is fantastic. I highly recommend it.
Yeah. If you like Breaking Bad, that's where the maker of Breaking Bad got his start too. So you can see some of his most early works as a writer and director. This one I don't know if you know too well, so maybe this will be more cultural osmosis. Supernatural.
I I would say that I don't know it. I'm going to assume that it is appropriately rated. I know it has a fandom. I'm not interested in it, but that's more because it was CW kind of thing, right?
Yeah, it was kind of like, it was like cutting edge on B tier TV. It's like it's like a C tier TV done in a B, like with B tier production quality, I guess. Or something like that. I would say that I'm going to have to give it overrated myself because of like that fandom you talked about. A lot of it was revolved around shipping the two main characters, the two male characters who were brothers.
Yeah, I'm going to go with overrated.
All right. This one I know you know well and have opinions on. We both do. Lost.
I'm going to go with overrated. I know that this is going to be like salt in the wound. I really enjoyed Lost. I think that there's a lot to like about Lost, but to me, ultimately, I feel like Lost suffered from the prevailing television model at the time, where you had to have 25 episodes. It was long running. It was episodic. I think if they had done Lost in the present era, where they were making a tight 12 episodes, no commercial breaks, and could just really plot out exactly what they were doing, the show would have hit a little harder. It was innovative for the time that it came out. I didn't really like how they ended it, and for me, it is overrated.
Overrated. Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll have our Lost episode, I'm sure, at some point.
Sure,
and not just the one that's on Patreon, that it'll have good audio. It'll be about the show Lost.
But I promise you, I will make sure we don't record audio for it.
Okay. Millennium. Did you ever watch that one?
Oh, wow. Was Kiefer Sutherland in that?
I don't think so. I think it was, what's his face? Lance Hendrickson, I think it was.
This is just like barely in my memory. I totally forgot about this. I don't have a rating for it, but I would be interested in watching it. I think it was sort of X-Files related in a way, right?
Yeah, no, it was like a spinoff of X-Files, if I understand correctly. I always got it pitched to me as like the more adult X-Files.
I'm interested. I don't know if it's good, but I'm interested.
Yeah, I know. It's like kind of one of those like you probably have picked up on the theme here. So it's just one of those shows that was before my time fully matured. I felt like I couldn't watch it. Now I realize the show. I might actually replace one of these shows here in just a moment, but I'm going to keep going on. So I have Star Trek pre-J.J. Abrams. So this would previously be original series all the way through Voyager. However you feel about that era of Star Trek.
It's hard for me to say that it's underrated because Trekkies are serious business. Like if you're a Trekkie, you're probably, that being said, I'm very high on Next Generation. I haven't watched a lot of the original series. I'm also very high on Deep Space Nine and Voyager. I grew up with them. I'm not going to say that they're overrated. I'm going to say that they're probably appropriately rated.
Yeah, that's fair. We got to take that option away from you, though.
Okay.
Yeah, but I would say, like, if I someday I will say right now, someday I plan before I die to watch that era of Star Trek all the way through.
Yes, and I plan to have relations with a Ferengi.
Okay. Ooh. Nice. Well, now got to ask the opposite side of the question, or opposite side of the coin. Star Trek post J.J. Abrams.
I mean, I enjoyed the movies. It's hard to say that they're underrated because they were big box office success. Maybe they are a little bit overrated if you've only had, that version of Star Trek in your life. Maybe you're missing out on all the cool things that came before it. So we'll go slightly overrated.
Okay, I gotcha. Yeah, I kind of feel like it would be like a flip flop. Like there probably would be post J.J. Abrams stuff I would want to watch, but I think would be less than the whole versus like pre J.J. Abrams. I would think that the whole.
Oh, you're including like Picard and stuff in this.
I guess
there's
Picard
stuff I'm
would.
interested in, but I haven't watched any of it.
Yeah, I would say I heard good things about the last season of Picard.
Okay.
I'm going to swap this one out. I'll let you know what I'm swapping out down the line, but I'm going to say the show Sliders. Do you remember that one?
No, but I prefer full-size burgers, so I'm going to go overrated.
Okay, so there was an era of TV, like I would say, at least when it came to popular, was it network TV? Lost was the first show that you literally kind of needed to see the first episode all the way through the final episode. You needed to watch it in order, episode to episode, to really get the experience.
Yeah.
There were shows before Lost that I thought that was true of, and I avoided watching because I was like, well, I haven't seen the first episode, so I missed out on them. And those shows would include Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Sliders. And I thought I couldn't watch either of those shows because I hadn't seen the first episode, and you had to see
Turns
the
out that's
first.
not the case.
Turns out that's not the case. I think seeing the pilot of those shows would usually be beneficial because they would establish all the rules for the show. But after you've seen the pilot, you could watch probably any episode. And in fact, any episode should teach you the rules. Episodic TV, you know. But it was episodic TV that kind of presented itself as serialized TV or had serialized elements. And that kind of scared me when I was like 8, 9.
Yeah.
That era. Finally, as writers, I think I know which way this one's going. The Twilight Zone.
Yeah, I mean, Twilight Zone's got to be underrated currently.
For sure.
I mean, it's, you know, and you just saying this, you know, made me think of a couple other entries that could easily be on this list. I mean, I think you could have thrown Twin Peaks on this list. I think you could have put Fringe on this list.
I forgot about Fringe.
Yeah, I think you could have also included, what's the other one that was Outer Limits?
Yeah, that's the other Twilight Zone. In fact, I probably should have paired that. In fact, that would have been smart to pair the Outer Limits and the Twilight Zone, since, you know, they're kind of like the Pepsi and Coke of those kind of shows.
I don't have a lot of memories of either of them. I mean, there's a few iconic Twilight Zone type of things, but yeah, I think I'd be down for, you know, maybe that's good React content. We should do a Twilight Zone React
Hell
series.
yeah, I think so. Hey, if you want it on the Patreon, we'll do at least a pilot of it with like an iconic episode of the Twilight Zone. Maybe we could do one of both. Maybe we could do a Twilight Zone and Outer Limits, pair them together.
Let's do it. Patreon only content initially, and we'll see.
Yeah, though I will say the Outer Limits, I could be misremembering, and internet, feel free to remind me, or I'll Google it tonight. But I feel like the Outer Limits, it probably existed before this, but I feel like they did a reboot that was like Showtime oriented, so they kind of Skinamaxed it up a little. I know that might make it even better for Patreon content, right? But I remember there being something like the Outer Limits. Maybe it was just a very similar title that was like, you know, it would be like science fiction horror, but also a little sexiness, like in the middle.
Everything should have a little sexiness right in the middle, just like an Oreo.
Anyways, the one that I hard swapped out was The Prisoner. Do you remember that show?
Barely. That
It
was
was-
the one that was like there was going to be a remake of it, or there was.
They did do a remake, I would think, with Henry Cavill, or not Henry Cavill, the guy who played Jesus.
He was like on an island. He was like one of the inspirations for Lost.
Exactly. That's the main way I know The Prisoner, though I've learned more through video essays. I haven't watched the show properly, but I've learned like basically its plot. But yeah, it was the big thing was like when people talked about Lost, they would say it's like Twin Peaks, it's like The Prisoner, you know, it's like these three shows that actually had consistent continuity. I guess Twin Peaks is another great example of a show that you really needed to watch week in, week out, at least during up until the big mystery was solved. All right. Well, that was the 8 to rate lightning round. We had a lot to say about those science fiction shows, so I would love to know if you think we were fair to them. Answer in the comments below. And finally, Danny, I got something random for you. I'm taking on the something random. Now, you know that means it's going to be a lame something random.
Absolutely. No
I'd
chance.
almost venture to say I'm like substitute teacher something random. I'd almost will put on a movie.
Yeah. Jeez. What a cop out.
I know. I was juggling quite a few things, but I have had something weighing on my head.
Okay.
And I think you know about it. We talked about it a little bit the other day.
Was that the weird sleep thing where you had the ghost cuddler?
No, not quite that. We can get into that. That talk about Patreon content. Maybe we should just I should just tell you that story again and then cut that for Patreon. But no, what it is that I have a box full of stuff. And it's stuff that I'm having a hard time getting rid of.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask you for what you think is the best method, the most ethical method of getting rid of something. Then I'm going to consult Google and see what they say. So there's not many of them. We're only going to do a couple. But what do you think is the correct method of disposing of LED light bulbs?
Bury them.
Bury them.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. That's really fast.
A child's playground.
How to...
Public child playground.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. So that they may be blessed with great ideas throughout their lives.
Okay, let's see if it's anything more than just throw it in the trash can. Oh, no, you can just recycle or throw those away.
also, you can bury them.
Yeah, and I got a question: is Houston like a non-recycling city?
I don't know. I recycle.
You recycle. I don't have
But
recycling.
I'm in the woodlands, so
Yeah, so that's
It's
different.
not even part of Houston.
No, not officially. Now, do you know? And I know this. It's just a bit of a hassle. Do you know the proper way of getting rid of hard drives?
You are supposed to slip them in somebody's backpack. I don't know. What are you supposed to do with them?
Well,
is that the thing where you get the screw, the drill? You drill them.
that's the best. That is like the most immediate way to get rid of the thing you're supposed to do before you get rid of it in a more ethical way is you're supposed to destroy it thoroughly. And so screw driving a screw through the main board of it usually will make it to where you can't get the data. You could hit it with a hammer. You just have to really destroy those things if you don't want your data. So consider this a public service announcement. If you got hard drives, anything with storage, phones, got to be careful with those too. You got to wipe them. You kind of have to destroy them hardcore. Otherwise, you could leave your data in somebody else's hands. Shredding is the best way. You can get them shredded into tiny pieces. Degaussing, so that would be destroying it with a magnet.
Ooh.
Yeah, clearing it. And then you can recycle. So drilling is actually low on the list, though. Putting a hole in a hard drive destroys the platter and prevents anyone from using the data. So be careful with that. I have like 5 or 6, and they don't even work. That's the annoying thing. They don't even work, but they're still like, I have to do something to destroy them, like drill them, and then, get rid of them.
This begs the question as to what you're worried about being recovered. Patreon content.
We'll be right back. More after the show. The hard drive, I remember the LED light bulbs. I'm trying to think of what else there is that I need to get rid of. I wouldn't know how to, if it ever came up, I wouldn't know the proper way of getting rid of those camera lenses. Fortunately, I'm not planning on that. But so hopefully in the
Is there like a risk in throwing them away?
I just don't think, well, I guess I think of things, it's like, I think the first and foremost is it should be reused or recycled, so that,
Sure.
Yeah, I don't want to just throw, I've often, especially when I moved, I had to just, be like, well, I'm just putting it in this trash can. I'm just not going to think too hard about it. But it's really tough for me to put things in a trash can. I think that's how my hoarding is going to evolve, because my grandfather and my mom, well, my mom's not a hoarder. So I should not put that on her. She's not a hoarder. My grandfather was a hoarder, and I fear that could come back to me. And so I think my grandfather's logic in hoarding was, this will be useful again to me. My logic is this could be useful for somebody else.
Got it.
Yeah.
So, and you're kind of paralyzed by the not wanting to waste it aspect.
Correct. Yeah. So I'm trying to get past that, and I was very, hypercritical of his hoarding. So, what it was the term like when you, but for the grace of God kind of thing. I'm so close to being a hoarder myself. I have to be careful. That's why you'll see me purge, like extremely sometimes.
Yeah. After a lot of drinking, especially.
Yeah. Should I tell the dream story? We'll maybe cut here for a little Patreon tidbit.
Are we done with? We can do that after we wrap.
Okay, cool. Well, hey, check out Patreon. There might be 2 things up there now, including my weird
Dream
story about being, what is it? What would you say? Cuddled by a stranger.
Yeah. If you want to find out the Joel getting cuddled by a stranger story, then you definitely want to join the Patreon.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and, if you're interested in anything and everything Mega Moth Studios related, I would first and foremost have you go from this YouTube channel to the Mega Moth Studios TikTok. Danny does a lot of great work over there. If you like, I have a feeling as he does more research, he's probably going to be putting out more little tidbits along the way there. That content's ever evolving, and he does a great job keeping up with it. So check us out on TikTok. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook. But those are mostly updated for X Seekers of Fortune content specifically. And if you haven't already, X Seekers of Fortune is available to purchase late pledge through late pledges on Pledge Manager. The best way to get there is go to Kickstarter.com, look up X Seekers of Fortune, and you'll see a little late pledge button. Click on that, and you'll be right on your way to getting your copy of the first edition of X Seekers of Fortune.
There's definitely a link to pre-order directly in our link trees as well, if that's easier. I did want to tell you one thing, though, I saw on Instagram today that I do think pertains to your disposal theme. Have you heard of the test?
No, please tell me.
The test is if you accidentally on an object, would you clean it or just throw it away?
That is a great method. I can totally see that as being a great method of being like, no, just get rid of this. No, like Marie Kondo, why don't you use that one next time? Does it sparkle joy? No. Would you clean from it?
There you go.
Maybe.
Because that's, I mean, joy is such a hard thing to wrap your brain around. It's like, do I even know what joy feels like? But everyone knows what it's like to see on something.
Obviously not my story to tell, but I was listening to a podcast where a comedian talked about having, have themselves after a night of drinking, and talking about like having come home and washed the shoes that they had gotten upon. And my feeling was, man, that's rough. You can't just throw those things away.
Yeah.
Like and trust me, like I got some nice shoes here. If I pooped on these, if I got on these, I don't know. The mud, maybe I'd clean off, or I would clean off mud, but if I got on them, that's it. And that would be a big loss. So to imagine like being in a situation where you poop on your shoes and then you have to clean them and continue wearing them. It's like you don't have that money to buy a new pair. That's rough.
Yeah. And then you just have that reminder every time you look down that you had a bad night.
Exactly. That's you want to get rid of those memories too. Well, folks, speaking of memories, we hope that we've created some here for you today. So this has been my co-host Danny. Thank you so much for that tale and doing that research.
Yes.
And I've been Joel, reminding you that you got to start somewhere. So why not here? Thanks for listening.